Hi, this is the Eclectic Radical, and welcome to my Monday night live stream. I'm Chris Richards, the Eclectic Radical. I want to thank you again for joining me and putting up with me as I try to figure this out. Uh, I know what I want to talk about today, which is a nice change. First and foremost, I want to talk about Neera Tanden again, simply because if she's really going to be heading the OMB, then we really need to talk about why people don't like it. It's got nothing to do with how she's acted on Twitter, even though she's bullied plenty of leftists on Twitter. It's got nothing to do with whether or not she got into it with Republicans on Twitter. Who cares? I wish people were more sincere when they got into it with Republicans on Twitter. Other than that, who cares? I will say that I'm not very impressed by the defenses of Neera Tanden because nobody can say why she should be in charge at OMB. They just criticize people who say that she shouldn't for being biased for a whole bunch of reasons that have nothing to do with the crappy stuff Neera Tanden has actually done. So back when he worked for her as a journalist at Think Progress, she punched Bernie Sanders' former campaign manager, though she says pushed. But punched is how several witnesses there at the time described it. So there's that. She's about as good a boss as Amy Klobuchar. Second, in 2012, she was pushing hard for cuts to Social Security as part of a deal with Republicans. And if you think about that, well, it's just a little bit depressing. We were supposed to be saving Social Security from Trump. We're supposed to be experiencing a rebirth of America under Joe Biden as he builds back better. And here we have Neera Tanden, who, like Biden himself, once told the world that she wanted to cut Social Security and she wanted to cut Medicare. And it's bad enough. It's bad enough that we've got that with Trump. It's bad enough that we've got that with Joe Manchin. Do we really need Joe Biden and Neera Tanden to give us more of the same? I don't think we do. I really don't. What do you guys think? Feel free to speak up in the chat whenever you like. I am watching it. I do hope to have a little bit of activity. And please let me know if I get too boring. I mean, now, if we did want to talk about Neera's Twitter behavior, of course, she's been just horrible to everyone. But then she's been horrible to everyone in person, too. So I don't know if I can blame that on Twitter. She said plenty of awful things to people face to face and on television. But an OMB chair who isn't a Republican and has no problem with means testing Social Security, if that's what Joe Biden wants to do, doesn't fill me with comfort and joy this holiday season. It's not something I look for into the new year. I'm having enough issues with my sanity getting through Trump and the rest of this one still, because Trump's giving us our nerves a roller coaster on his own, isn't he? The coup stuff is still silly, but I do believe that Trump is going to have to be dragged out on Inauguration Day. It's one of the few things I'm looking forward to. I just wish people weren't so invested in finding excuses for Biden, even now because of Trump. which brings me into my transition to Javier Becerra, who I learned this morning was being touted by Biden as choice for HHS Secretary of Health and Human Services. Now, this morning I was greeted by news from Harvey J.K. and David Sirota that Javier Becerra is a good choice because he's supported Medicare for all and has excellent positions on the border and better positions on refugees than our previous Secretary of Health and Human Services, Alex Azar, and that he was going to be a good choice. And then later today, someone popped out a Fresno Bee story pointing out that as Attorney General of California, he had resisted releasing the disciplinary records of cops even after the state of California passed it into law that cops' disciplinary records had to be released. Now, this is the sort of thing that came up in Kamala Harris's record when she was Attorney General of California too, which doesn't surprise me. But let's face it, the Attorney General is the boss. If they really don't want to try a case, they don't try a case. They represent the state, but they are independent from the governor in the same way that the federal Attorney General is supposed to be independent of the president and was before our more recent experience with Donald Trump and his lackeys. But the idea is that rather than prosecute who the governor says or try the cases the governor says, well, Javier Becerra chose to try a case saying, no, we're not going to release this information to the public after it was passed into law. And covering up for bad cops is not something I really like seeing in the history of any cabinet member. And I'm really disappointed to see this in Becerra. And allegedly, this is why Becerra is being talked about for Health and Human Services Secretary and not Attorney General. His behavior while Attorney General of California. Well, thank you, Dorothea. This is a good one. Talk about why means testing is bad. I have my own thoughts, but it's controversial. Well, I don't know how controversial it is. I do think means testing is bad. The primary reason means testing is bad is means testing is a really good reason. A really good reason for denying people. They're not poor enough. They're not really poor enough, so they don't deserve it. The reason you have a minimum is so that you have an excuse to say no to everybody who's over the minimum. That's why means testing is bad. It's a built-in excuse to say no, which means you're going to be looking for reasons to say no. You're going to measure those you're going to measure those means very closely. You want to make sure that people are poor enough to deserve help. And that's what it comes down to, the idea of, do people really deserve help? Are they really poor enough? Are they really suffering enough? That's why I think means test is bad. People shouldn't have to prove they're suffering enough to prove they deserve help. Thank you, Dorothea. That one's really good. Thanks. Where was I? Javier Becerra. Well, I'm covering up for cops. Really not much more you can add to that. But it's disappointing. I suppose it shouldn't be a surprise. I'm actually a little bit surprised, even though, again, it's sort of what you expect from an attorney general of a state right now. But by comparison, the new district attorney of Los Angeles County, George Gaston, has already turned the whole district's attorney's office around. No more death penalty, no more cash bail. All the reforms that people talk about on ordered from his desk in the first 2 hours after taking office. This man was just elected. This is impressive. This is fast work. This is faster work than any newly elected progressive prosecutors yet. Even the wonderful Mike Schmidt here in Portland. This is great stuff. 2 hours is fast work. Congress can't work that fast, but a district attorney can. Think about that if you're thinking about running for office and you have a law degree, please. Nobody in Congress is going to change anything in 2 hours. There was some drama on Twitter today. Some friends of mine in the Metro Atlanta DSA, they were on my second show. You might remember some of them being here, Rogelio and Chelsea. Metro Atlanta DSA just got punked for clout by a Twitch and YouTube streamer named Destiny, who has way too many followers for someone I'd never heard of, who once defended the Kyle Rittenhouse for what he did in Kenosha. Decided he was going to talk shit about the Metro Atlanta DSA because they didn't want to get out the vote for Ossoff with him. Well, no, they didn't want to be associated with Destiny because he said protesters should be shot and defended Kyle Rittenhouse. Who would want to canvass with him? So naturally, he made it about the DSA dividing the left, attacked socialists despite having a rose emoji in his profile, and really making a fool of himself in general. And it wasn't pretty. It was kind of embarrassing to read some of the things that his defenders were saying and why he thought the Metro Atlanta DSA would go along with whatever was floating around in his brain. I don't know. It's just crazy. He even called me out over something I said, and it's just hilarious. People go to so much trouble for such silly things, and they're just chasing clout, and the people doing the real work are still doing the real work. And if you're doing the real work, whether you're in Atlanta, like my friends Chelsea and Rogelio, whether you are in Illinois, like my friend Alan Max Axelrod, or whether you are in New York, like many of my friends, most notably Shauna Morlock, let me know, and I will try to put a spotlight on the real work you're doing, because that stuff is more important than the clout chasing. And one of the big reasons that I am here is to try to broadcast that stuff so people know what's happening and how they can help. On that note, if you have been following No Ameren Shutoffs, there is some good and bad news on that account. The good news is basically they have won. Ameren, Illinois has caved and nobody else is going to be shut off. Unfortunately, neither Ameren, Illinois, nor Governor J.B. Pritzker are exactly moving their asses about getting people's juice turned back on. Now, let me remind folks again, please. This is a plague. We're supposed to be washing our hands with hot water frequently. It's hard to do that if your water or your gas or your electricity have all been turned off. That makes it very hard to follow the necessary safety protocols. I would also point out that there's an eviction moratorium in Illinois, but if you cut off somebody's gas and electric and they can't keep warm in the wintertime and you don't turn it back on, even after you stop cutting it off for other people, well, guess what? They're probably going to have to find someplace warm anyway. That becomes a de facto eviction. You just made somebody else homeless, and you got around the fact that you can't evict people right now. So it's great that they stopped people from getting their gas and electricity shut off. J.B. Pritzker needs to get people's shit turned back on. And they need to go ahead and stop the water shutoffs next. I hear they're working on that now. I hope to have updates when I hear more. But there is good news out there, even if it's not all joy all the time. There are still activists who are still winning real fights around this country. And don't forget that. Don't forget them. Don't give up hope. We're actually winning. The squad is 7 people now instead of 4. There is a reason that everybody is trying to convince people right now that leftists are the reason that centrists lost elections. It's because they want to blame anyone but themselves. They want to escape responsibility. They want to keep running centrists and right wingers. The only way to stop them from running centrists and right wingers is to keep primarying them. And it's very slow, but it's very necessary. Thank you, Midori. They are reforming the Progressive Caucus to make it more accountable. I've heard that. I have heard all sorts of things about the Progressive Caucus the way it has been. I've heard the rumor, I'm sure others have heard or seen, that Mark Pocan was selling membership for $5,000 donations to his super PAC, which is a shame. Being able to help people raise money is a reason that people get congressional leadership positions all too often. But it's very disappointing to see that happen with the Progressive Caucus, which is supposed to be different. And I have heard that Pramila Jayapal really wants to reform the Progressive Caucus to make it more accountable, to make people talk the talk if they want to join the caucus. I like that. I think that's good. I'll believe it when I see it. We'll see what happens. We'll see how accountable they are. The thing to remember is we only need 15 progressives to stand up to Nancy Pelosi and say, no, you can't pass that unless you do business with us. Only 15? I would love it. I would love it if that happened. If Pramila can make that happen, then it doesn't matter if the Progressive Caucus is only those 15 people right now. It will grow if they are effective. Thank you again, Midori. I appreciate that. So that brings me to one more thing. One more thing that I definitely don't want to forget to bring up. Here it is. This is Truly. And here it is. Here it is. This is a thing of beauty. This was brought to my attention by an Aria Blooms. She's wonderful. You should all follow her. She's great. You can see how she puts it. New type of racism just dropped. I cannot disagree with her. You see, it's called The New Squad. Stars in their eyes. They're in love with the idea. That's great. That's great. What do these guys all have in common? Oh, besides the fact that none of them have a job yet, and that two of them gave up their seats in Congress already to lose Senate races. Oh, that. They're all reasonably young white guys. That's what they all have in common. I see. A little misogyny there to go with the racism, too. Plus, they're all moderates. And let's face it, who needs a moderate squad like that? I bet none of them will want to join the Progressive Caucus, Midori. And yes, Pearl, that is an excellent description. Yes, Colleen. That does look like a suit commercial. I totally agree. Fern's being smarter than me again. He's not a Congressional Progressive Caucus member for very much longer, Fern. Yes, exactly, Pearl. Exactly. Oh, those were good. I gotta say. Yes. The New Squad, sponsored by Men's Warehouse. That's perfect. Sponsored by Men's Warehouse and Playgirl. Now, is there anything anybody else wants to talk about tonight from the chat? I know that I've covered everything on my list before I actually got to 30 minutes, which I still need to work on. I've got to be just a little bit slower, I guess, or talk just a little bit more. Though I'm really thinking I need guests going forward. And I'm going to bring this up since Fern mentioned it. Yes, Joe III is a Congressional Progressive Caucus member. He is an example of the sort of reform it needs. Fern, you'll have to let me know if you're still in the chat. Is he also a New Democrat, or is he pretending to just be progressive? I'm going to go ahead and take a couple more while we're waiting. I have not talked much about India. I should. Midori is right to bring this up too. India is currently experiencing a general strike. It is the biggest in the history of the world. More workers are on strike in India than have ever been on strike anywhere before. They are protesting Modi and India's right-wing government, and they are holding out. This is the citizenship law, isn't it, Midori? Stop me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure this started because of the citizenship law, and it's been going on since. The citizenship law was saying that Muslim immigrants were no longer welcome, and that Muslim immigrants already in India were not eligible for Indian citizenship. Now, since India is the biggest Muslim country in the world, it's kind of a big deal that they wanted to keep Muslims out and deny citizenship to non-citizen Muslims already there. And the general strike is huge. Everybody is doing this in solidarity and opposition, whether they're Muslims or not. It's beautiful to see. I wish they had that kind of energy here in the United States, where we could really make this happen. All right. Thanks, Fern. He should be a New Dem member. I knew he wouldn't be a blue dog, but I'm kind of surprised he's not a New Dem member. Joe K Street kind of has that Hakeem Jeffries vibe about him sometimes. Now, does anybody else know what Pearl is talking about? I tweeted about it, but it did not get nearly the attention I thought it might. So Cardi B last night wanted to buy a $90,000 purse. And several people made several other suggestions instead of the $90,000 purse. And Cardi B got a little salty. Particularly, she got angry at someone who told her to donate $500 to a soup kitchen or a homeless shelter. And she said, I'm going to buy that purse. And she bought it. And today she was tweeting about whether or not people wanted to see the purse. And I said, and I stand by it, that my friend Dominique Remy should have $25,000 out of that $89,000 to make her movie, The Canary, which is about Black maternal mortality. You can follow Dominique at Canary Filmmaker on Twitter. She deserves it. She's great. And I can understand why maybe Pearl got more pissed off than it should have. I try to remember that there's not much that should really surprise me, and that people with a certain amount of success are expected to consume at a certain level. And I can't be super angry, but it makes me more angry than it should too, Pearl. It's not just you. That's a good point, Fern. But again, there are several people who have tried to ride the line, both progressive and New Dem. Hakeem Jeffries was in both caucuses. Katie Hill was in both caucuses. I believe there are a few others. I'm not going to try to name them because I'll get it wrong. Yes, she could have. I agree. She didn't need to be salty. It does make a difference. She could have just bought the purse and not said anything, and no one would have had to know. She wanted to talk about the purse, and she got mad when people who have followed her because of some of her political positions might have had an issue. She did donate like $2 million after shaming. Well, that's good, but she still needs to give Dominique Remy $25,000 for her movie because it's important. It's a really important topic. White women need to understand more about what black women go through when they're pregnant. I still can't figure out how any purse can be worth $90,000. To me, that's part of the problem. Well, Dorothea, that's part of the problem to me, too. The fact that the purse exists and that she felt like the purse was particularly desirable because of its status and price tag. And yes, like Midori is saying, she should not have shamed people. Just a fun fact from the Mexico side of things. As they prepare for the 2021 midterms, the former largest leftist party there has joined a coalition with the neolibs. How cheerful. What could go wrong, right? I'm assuming this is to run against AMLO. AMLO is the current Mexican president. He is their Bernie Sanders, only he actually won. He's had a mixed record so far, as most leftists who win actually have, but Fern tells me he's done more good than bad. Well, things have been a little lighter this show, and I'm glad. It's true, but it's good to talk about the heavy and the dark stuff now and then. It's important. It's real. Somebody else was tweeting today that we're not only not going to go back to normal, but that 2020 is going to be the most normal year that any of us remember for a long time. I hope that is going a little too far, but I do believe it's going to get worse before it gets better. Any last thoughts, fun facts, questions, comments? Trying to think whether there's anything. Yes. Yes. If you can afford mutual aid, please, as best you can, join a group in your area and help. Join a Twitter group and help. Share mutual aid requests. Give to people if you can afford it. If you can't, share it. People are going to need help to get through the winter. It's not going to be cool. The government has not come through. Biden doesn't take office until January. Nobody's going to come through until then. It's really depressing. The fact that our government has failed us bothers me. I think that it's important to understand the failure of our government right now is a total failure. It's not just Donald Trump's failure. It's Donald Trump and Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell's failure together. Charles Schumer deserves some blame in there too. It's not anybody's failure alone. Okay, Fern, that's what I thought. Yeah. Huh. So they want to get revenge and they're teaming up with the neocons to get revenge over the more popular socialist. They shouldn't have agreed to privatize Pemex. Pemex is the Mexican oil company, if you didn't know. I would love to go in depth sometime. I would love to talk about Mexican politics and hear about it from someone who knows more about it than I do. You have a welcome invite when you have functional equipment, my friend. And yes, I shouted them out earlier, but let's shout them out again. They should not let internet celebrities bully them, and they didn't. I'm very proud of all my friends in Atlanta. It should be noted that despite what some of his trolls and what Destiny himself tried to claim, he was not invited. He was people who were trolls and fans of his were attempting to wrangle an appearance on his behalf and were asking for resources that the Metro Atlanta DSA was not particularly interested in sharing for someone who said Black Lives Matter protesters should be killed in a city full of Black Lives Matter protesters. They didn't think it was appropriate, and I agree with them. And that's a good place for me to stop for the night. I want to thank everyone who joined me in the chat. That really helps this go better. Thanks, guys. I hope everybody has a great night and a great week. And I will see everybody on Saturday when I'm back with Political Hack and Slash with Niall Elcom. Thanks and good night. Bye.